Hi, Major Scores, and welcome to another episode of EU5. I am continuing my series with Austria. In part one of the campaign, I started to create more of those natural borders with Austria. Right, I've expanded westward to consolidate our lands. When you start a campaign with Austria, your lands are somewhat divided. So the intention was to create a bridge towards my western provinces, so that I can connect them and actually get some value from those provinces, right? Because I have zero control, as it has no connection possible to my capital. So in this campaign, I start to build my nation up, start to build a lot of the buildings that can increase control, temples, bridges, start to research things like pound lock canals, and then start to build up my army so I can take on my stronger neighbor to the north, Bohemia, who has been rapidly expanding, as you see in pretty much every playthrough, right? Like Bohemia and France tend to blob and take over everyone, and Austria tends to get killed by them in most of the AI playthroughs. So I'm hoping to reverse course there, gain some stronger strategic alliances with Hungary and Poland in order to throttle them from attacking me, right? They would prioritize just the weaker nations to their north, and then get strong enough where I can actually take them on, right? Coalitions start to form with them, and has more of that ability to take on the Bohemian Empire, who was the HRE emperor at the start, and then towards the end of the last video, they voted me the HRE emperor when Bohemia died. So I'll continue this expansion and have some fun with it. I had a lot of fun with the first campaign. I have intention or a desire to eventually build Germany, because going through a lot of the internals, I am actually not able to form a country as Austria. I thought I could, but I was mistaken. It says I can only stay as a duchy based on the requirements. If people know why that is the case, where I can't form a kingdom as Austria, shout out in the comments. I'm still learning through the process, but right now it's just kind of building cities and towns, start to upgrade my economy, get my silver mines upgraded, start to build more of the jewelers, to kind of really just snowball that income. There's a lot of valuable land that's within my country. My capital's still in Vienna. I probably will have to move it down the line, but I think from just as historical playthrough, I've just kind of left it there, even though it's not like the most geographically centered. I've not intended to kind of go after Hungary. So all of the land immediately west of Vienna is Hungarian. So down the line, I might move it towards Prague. But for the historical gameplay, I'm using the cultural center of Vienna as my capital. And we start off the campaign immediately at war. Our ally Hungary calls us into a war with Bavaria, and we see this a lot with them, right? They're kind of like a frenemy of mine, because they tried to take this land out from under me, and this is obviously proper German territory. So the ideal situation is I siege everything down before Hungary can get there, and this way I own the provinces. With the end result is they just kind of take money in war reps if they don't have any of the land itself, or the land that they ultimately desire, which was both the upper and lower Bavaria and Aquileia in the Italian regions. There is a lot of that land that Aquileia has that's in proper German borders. The intention I have in this campaign is really just to prioritize the German territory so that I can form Germany. So if they take some of that Croatian land, it's not the end of the world, but I'm trying to just kind of block them from taking land. And Aquileia is a co-belligerent. I think they actually give me some land from both Upper Bavaria and Aquileia, because I kind of take it. So even though we're in this and they have provinces of interest, they're giving me the land that they don't desire. But I'm not transferring the territory over to them so that they can get more powerful and become just another adversary they have to take on down the line. I mean, I'm eventually going to have to fight them anyway, but for now I need them, right? I need them to stay loyal enough for me to attack Bohemia, because I can't take Bohemia down on my own as it currently stands. So eventually get everything sieged down, and Hungary pieces out, and they don't take any of the land that I desire. So a win-win at the end of the day. So we skip ahead a couple of decades here to the 1430s. I had another war with Bavaria that I didn't show. Just kind of isolated both of those two countries as like an island within my nation. So there's not really a risk of them being attacked, mainly by Bohemia, who's rapidly still expanding. I felt like I was at a position now where I can actually attack Bohemia. I finally had my allies, Hungary, Milan, and Poland, all at peace. They all seem to have been in constant wars over the last 3 decades. And I also was letting my antagonism go down. And this is actually quite a long war. Bohemia is a lot stronger than all of us from our military perspective, but we do have sheer numbers, right? You see, the war started in 1432, but at the end of the day, this war ends up taking about 9 years in order for me to get the war score up, right? Siege everything down. They have a ton of vassals, unfortunately, at their disposal, so the manpower is just kind of a constant wave. As you can see, I'm just making sure that I'm keeping my forces as concentrated as possible. Siege down land from the ultimate war goal, which takes quite a bit of time, right? Bohemia's forces are somewhat scattered as they're ping-ponging behind, against Poland, against Hungary, against Milan, to kind of bring some forces up towards some of the Bohemian vassals. So you're trying to keep your forces together, try to keep them with Hungary as well, so that we have enough overwhelming numbers. I don't have a standing army as it currently stands. I just couldn't afford it from a dollar's perspective, as I'm still kind of investing in my country. But ultimately, Bohemia does have that, right, and they have that advantage over all of my allies in this war. As you can see, they just are kind of wiping them down. But by the end of this war, they just really have no manpower left. They're trying to get out of the war. The real challenge was getting the war score up, as it continuously ticks down as they wipe little stacks of my allies, unfortunately. I wish they were using the same strategy as myself, as just kind of consolidating and staying near, not having it so divided so that they're easily picked off, or looking to kind of wipe some of their vassal stacks, which would make the war score go from a positive side on their end too. But it's a long and arduous war. I eventually turned the tide on this in the 1430s, so 1440s actually. So it's kind of like one of those historical French and English wars that last over a decade. And this is going to be the hardest of the wars against Bohemia, right? It's that first one. You had to kind of be a little bit meticulous, constantly siege them down, eventually get on and sit on their capital. Siege that down and get the war score started in my favor. My allies eventually peace out of the war, so it's just a 1v1 versus me and Bohemia, but luckily Bohemia is pretty weak. Their vassals are as well. They don't have the manpower that's recovered, just constantly being in wars prior to me attacking them, and then I eventually wear them down to turn the war score positively, right, and get some of those immediate provinces. Obviously Praha was not a province I could take, with the intention to start to form some vassals in the north to help me in future wars with Bohemia. Unfortunately, following that war, Hungary breaks their alliance with me, but fortunately I'm able to pick up the Habsburg Union with Sweden and Norway. It's kind of like the Kalmar Union. They I think they already had Habsburgs on their throne, and I was able to easily get that, get the integration levels up, and now the guarantee offensive, as well as the Union integration. So I'll eventually be able, with my son being the heir to both thrones, being able to integrate both of those nations once I'm able to consolidate the German regions. Further down the line, right, there's just no access to the Scandinavian regions as it currently stands. I barely have any sea access as it currently stands, so I'm looking to continue my expansion northward into Bohemia and proper Germany, before I start to integrate those unions into my nation. However, they do come into this war along with Poland, and it's a little bit more straightforward, right? It's not quite as difficult as the previous war. Every war becomes a little bit easier and easier, right, as I start to break them from an economy perspective. I always make sure that I take the war score, because I think they were giving me about 80 ducats a month once they get their economy back up and running. So really just kind of fueling my economy, helping me build towns and cities into my territories, build roads so that I can start to get a little bit better control, and just some of the burger buildings that are going to be most profitable, namely, the jewelers and tailors and those things that, you're just kind of looking at your markets, what's going to be most profitable from our nation perspective. So through the wars and the war reps, it's helping to kind of fuel my economy on the downturn, right after I kind of attack Bohemia, and then allow the antagonism to decline, allow peacetime, any kind of coalitions that potentially form to die down, just so that my allies don't all kind of break their alliance with me as well, right? I don't want to be isolated, to allow both Bohemia and potentially France to come knocking at my doors, right? So they're both still stronger than me as a whole, but with my allies, especially Bohemia, just isn't a match for my abilities as it currently stands. So I've also started to build more standing armies, so that I'm not as weak against them. And with the intention of this war is to really divide their lands, right? Like their capital, once you kind of isolate it from the rest of the lands, those lands become quite useless to Bohemia. So it kind of breaks them from an economy perspective, as well as the ability to bring forward as much levies as they were prior to doing that, right? So it does fracture the land, so I do need to get my war score up in order to kind of get the peace deal that I desire from the outcome of this war. But it's really just a matter of sieging everything down, getting to the lands before my allies, namely Poland, kind of snipes any of the land from them, and then making sure that they're not kind of sieging behind me on anything, right? As you can kind of see, they're sitting on my capital. So it's just kind of being mindful of where their armies are, not getting caught with any minor stacks from their armies, because they are still quite a strong nation, right? But again, they're starting to get weaker. They're starting to become a little bit easier to siege everything down, and just take little by little, start to build, take more land for myself, start to feed some of that into my vassals so that they get stronger, and then with the ability to kind of integrate them down the line, and then I'm not having to kind of use the cabinet members to integrate the land myself, right? So that's the intention, right, is to kind of break them and move them forward. And following my truce with Bohemia, I had the opportunity to join a coalition. As you can see there, I was able to re-ally Hungary. They weren't willing to come into the war, just didn't have enough favors. But there was a coalition that formed against Bohemia. I joined it almost immediately on truce and then declared, so that I owned the peace treaty then, versus just be a coalition and they just peace out down the line. This has its risks, because the coalition tends to have some of those small stacks, which helps them kind of grow some of the score. But it's really just about wearing down their nation, right? They are divided across a number of participants that are in this war, and they really don't have any kind of ability to get on my capital to kind of break it. So it's really all about just sieging down their provinces, get on Prague, get some of the surrounding areas, win the wars against them from a stack perspective, and then at the end of the day, they just really don't have any kind of manpower a bit left, right? We just have the overwhelming forces. I have standing armies now that can kind of go to toe with them, so you can kind of see they're not coming after my armies, because my standing army makes it a lot stronger, and when they do, my standing armies just kind of wipe them. It's a lot more strong, and because of this being a coalition, I'm actually able to take a lot more land for a lot less antagonism than just the parliament scores. So it was definitely using this to my advantage to siege things down, get the provinces, use mostly my professional armies to do the sieging, where the levies will be there for support, just so that they just kind of siege everything down sooner. and the levies can kind of get caught in a war and then can kind of wipe down, whereas the standing armies can kind of go toe-to-toe with anything that they put forward. Even levies that are 2 or 3 times the size just are not really much of a match. So it's the ability to kind of fight with the strength of Bohemia, and you can see I'm taking quite a bit of land, which leads to a lot of antagonism. And as we skip ahead to the late 1470s, you can see I just got a diplomatic hegemony there. I occasionally get the military hegemony from France or Ming. So I have one of the stronger nations in the world as it currently stands, which it's just really just no match for Bohemia. Hungary's in this war again with me, right? I've re-allied them and they're coming into this war. It's mainly just getting the lands that Hungary desires to block them off for future expansion, because they will eventually break their alliance with me again, and then not be willing to ally me as I take some of those Bohemian lands, especially the Silesian lands that Hungary kind of desires. So the intention of these next few wars is to kind of block Hungary and then eventually Poland from expanding into Bohemian land, so that I can control the proper German territory and not have to fight other nations for that. I think I'll eventually have to fight Hungary down the line, but for now we're allies. I don't really intend to have another strong nation with high antagonism. I don't really get a lot of antagonism for Poland and Hungary when I take German lands. So the only ones I really have to worry about are the other nations in the HRE, which they're really not any match for the army that I could put forward. But if I had to fight Poland, Hungary, potentially France at the same time, would become quite challenging. But as you can see, it's just continue to push those borders further and further, taking 2 or 3 provinces at a time. And then as we kind of move forward, I still have these nations in the middle of my country in lower and upper Bavaria. So attacking them, trying to get some of those lands out, trying to continuously push from a borders perspective on the proper German territory, as they call Aquileia in as well. So it just enables me to have more of an ability to take more clay, take it little by little, not try to take too much of the provinces. I wouldn't be able to take both upper and lower in this war, so just kind of use those as separate wars down the line. But it's pretty straightforward. I can just use my standing armies to kind of siege these down and not even worry about my levies, just because they really aren't putting any kind of presence that can compete against the might of my armies as it currently stands. So we take those lands. You can see antagonism has grown. Hungary drops their alliance with me. I was able to pick up an alliance with the 2 Sicilies, who's rapidly growing in Italy, so they become actually somewhat of a valuable ally as well. They do attack some of the southern Italian nations, or south of me, right, the northern Italian nations, as well as Tunis. I really can't help them when they go to war with Tunis and Morocco. So they call me into those wars, but I kind of do nothing about it, right? I have not built a single boat yet. I figured proper German kind of build that navy up in the 16th, 17th century once I kind of get further along from a tech perspective, but I really don't have any proper coast to even build anything from a sailor perspective. As you can see, I think I'm growing I have 65 with 3 sailors as it currently stands. So, back at war with Bohemia, I have Poland in there. Hungary actually declares on them in the middle of this war, so then, I know I have to kind of siege down all of those bordering towns of Hungary and then block them off from blobbing. They don't take land from Bohemia unless they can they're not taking any of their vassals or anything like that. So luckily I'm able to kind of cuck them from future expansion by expanding my borders so that they're blocked from gathering anything. I also stay in this war a lot longer. I think they eventually peace out just because Bohemia is looking to kind of get out. They were in for quite a bit of time as well. So strategically, if you're in that same situation, you can just kind of be a war of attrition, stay in the war a lot longer than the AI will, and then taking all those lands and then blocking Hungary from future expansion. So we're back at war with Bohemia. I'm very conscious to not take any of their vassal lands, just with the intention that if I just concentrate on the Bohemian lands, that makes it harder for them to integrate their vassals, right, from a loyalty perspective. And also as they kind of siege on the land, they're not making any the progress on integrating any of them. And then once you kind of siege down all of Bohemia, then all of that land becomes my vassals for free, right, without the antagonism that would go with taking the land. So the intention here, as we turn the page into the 1500s, finalize that expansion and completely block off Hungary from Bohemia, and then continue that expansion northward, right, and start to block Poland from future expansion as well, in case they too get the idea to no longer be my ally, right? And as we kind of turn the page towards the next war in the 1510s, Lower Bavaria is the last remaining territory in Bavaria. Simple war, they didn't even have any allies, right? So I just used my standing army to siege it down, get the provinces. Decent sized coalition, but nothing to be concerned about. So I've continued to expand further northward. We skip ahead a couple of decades now to the 1530s. I've started to integrate some of my vassals, and working on that continuous border expansion with Bohemia. I'll create more, right? It's kind of constant expansion, and integrate them, start to create new vassals. To try not to get to a situation where they're disloyal, right, if you have too many vassals. So constantly playing that game of annexing land, potentially feeding some of them. They do become quite big. It takes a long time to integrate them, so it's just something to be mindful. It's probably better to have many small vassals versus a couple of bigger ones. In hindsight, if I were to do it again, I fed a couple of lands to some of them, but it's probably better to just have one province be a vassal, so it's a lot quicker from an integration perspective, just because it could take a couple of decades just to integrate a vassal, and several decades to integrate a union like Norway will be too. So things to just be considered, have to work on a better understanding on how to speed that up from probably future expansion or patches within the system. But again, another straightforward war with Bohemia. Work to isolate them further from their new capitals, as I've taken Prague from them, and just continuously push forward, right? Start to isolate them from their vassals as well, so that they're not annexing any of their own vassals, right, and having more clay that I have to take, right? So pushing the border, taking some of the lands, blocking off Hungary from future expansion. Blocking off Poland from future expansion, so that they don't have an avenue to attack if they don't, right? So here we are again, 1540s, same story, same things, different story, right? It's the continuous expansion. Build up my economy so that I'm in a position to attack France down the line, right? I have not gone to war with them yet. They're continuing a little bit of their expansion. They have quite a sized coalition that I think is thwarting them from attacking further into the HRE, luckily. The Netherlands is starting to build a vassal there as well. That's getting stronger and stronger, but nothing to be concerned about. I can take them on 1v1 even just with my standing armies. Same with Bohemia, right? I'm not even really kind of needing to raise my levies anymore to attack them. I can just kind of rely on the standing armies. It's just really not much of a match against what I can put forward from a strength perspective. So we're back at war with Bohemia again. They actually call in their ally Aquilira. I'm able to take the rest, or the remaining land that's in proper Germany, from them in this war as well. So just continues to get more territory so that I can form proper Germany, form proper Germany, I should say. It's pretty linear from a path perspective. I think I even have a revolt that happens in Bohemia as well at the same time. So it's just a matter of sieging that down and getting all of the land that I need from Bohemia, right? They're closing in on how much they have left. There's not a ton of their territory that they have remaining. That's not their vassals, right? So it's just a series of wars that we do here in the 1560s now, right? As we 1569 is another war, just continues to attack. It's a pretty linear strategy of just jumping on them immediately on peace deals so that they can't join or start a coalition that potentially might form, and have more of an ability to be more aggressive here, right? And I'm just trying to figure out the remaining territories. I'm able to take all of Bohemia here in this war. So it's just a matter of sieging down the territories and their vassals so that I can get the war score up, and then take all of Bohemia, right? And at the end of the day, all of that Bohemian land will then be integrated and become vassals of me, right? So I take all of that land, and you can see all of that yellowish orange color, beige, that was Bohemia is now white for the Archduke of Austria, right? I had about 3 vassals or so going in, and now I have 18 vassals, right, between vassals and fiefdoms. So now it's just improving their opinion of me, waiting the time period to integrate, using my diplos to continuously improve opinion of them, so that I can start to integrate those into my nation, as we start to move towards the age of absolutism, where I will be more of a centralized power from a European perspective, right? Vassals work in the first few ages, but as you start to move into the future ages, it's better to just have one economy, right? Again, like I said earlier, my capital's still in Vienna, but as I start to have more of an expansion here, constantly thinking about where I can put my potential capital into proper German territory, and move it from historical Austria to more of a centralized Prague, or potentially further north. So I'm trying to figure out what is the best solution. Prague is quite big. Vienna is the biggest nation or biggest city in my nation as it currently stands. But you can see the land that I need in order to form Germany. I have to take quite a bit from France, and I'm getting to the point where I am a match for France now, right? I have a stronger army. I utilized in the previous age. I picked the military focus in the age of expansion, age of exploration, just to have the strongest military I have. I think there were other focuses in there that might have been better for me from an economy perspective, but knowing that I'm competing against the big boys, I want to make sure that I have the strongest military power that I possibly can have, as I look to kind of rapidly grow, right? So if this video is of interest as I continue my expansion, I know it was quite a long period of time, right, from the 1400s to the 1570s, but there was a lot of repetitiveness in it, right, in terms of expansion. It's just jumping on, right? I'm not trying to expand too quickly, so just being a little bit more conscious of how you build, and then build the nation around it, right, through the different workshops that you can kind of build to grow the economy, making sure that your RGOs are currently up to max limits, right, in terms of available populations. Start to concentrate the populations into the towns in order to get them up to the 30K minimums to form cities, right, to continuously grow the economy. So if this is of interest, if this series, the next part of the campaign, I'm going to start to take the war towards France, right? I have eliminated Bohemia as a threat. There's no real threats to my east anymore between Hungary and Poland. I'm still allied to Poland. I have the Scandinavian ally union to my north. So it's just a matter of eliminating the threat, right? I'll eventually get an alliance with Castile in the next phase of the campaign, and bringing the fight to France, having a proper World War campaign against them in order to capture that territory. So please like and subscribe. Give any comments on if you've done similar campaigns with Austria. I thought this was a fun campaign. Start to build it up to into the proper German territory, where I'll use the next 150 years or so to really start to win those wars against the major forces in the European Empire right now. So hope you enjoyed this video, and tune in for the next phase, part 3, where I take on France. Thanks, everyone.